Warning: this review contains both positive and negative opinions of The Elder Scrolls Online. If you are a fanboy, you suck. Don't watch this video. The question is simple: has ESO succeeded in its mission by appealing to a broad range of gamers, or has it suffered an identity crisis from which there is no return? With these words boldly in the title, it's only fair we judge The Elder Scrolls Online not only as an MMO, but as an MMORPG with an emphasis on the RPG. This game has marketed itself as the latest chapter in the award-winning series, so it's only fair that it be held accountable for this claim. Besides, this will let me start this review at the beginning, with character creation. Most MMOs have failed us pretty badly in the past when it comes to character building. In a virtual space where your avatar is your second skin, 9 facial options simply don't cut it anymore. I'm happy to say character customization is where The Elder Scrolls Online succeeds. With sliders for everything from head to ass, ESO has more customization options than any Elder Scrolls game before it, which in itself is a feat. Unless you wanted to play as the Imperial race, however, in which case you are shit out of luck. We'll talk more about this game's need to rummage through your pockets a bit later, but for now let's move on. After character customization, you are greeted with a familiar tutorial, which starts with you as a prisoner and ends with your character being charged to save the world. It's typical fantasy bullshit, but it serves its purpose. The player escapes his imprisonment with a clear sense of purpose and a skill or two to boot. On the note of skills and progressions, thankfully for people everywhere, The Elder Scrolls Online takes its cues from its single-player predecessors by incorporating what I call the Howard Principle: play the way you want to play. Stupidly enough, in MMOs, the most important decision you'll ever make will be in the first 5 minutes of the game: your character class. In traditional MMOs, this decision will lock you down to a specific set of skill lines and specific styles of play. Classes in ESO are just a foundation for all the cool things you can grow up to be. ZeniMax went out on a limb with this class system, and the gamble certainly paid off. Want to be an orc caster who dual-wields axes and wears medium armor? Do it. Want to be an Argonian archer with a talent for healing? More power to you. Even better still, if any of these playstyles get stale, you're not forced to roll a whole new character. Within the first 5 hours of the game, I had tried a little of everything from staves to bows to two-handed weapons and more. Each weapon loadout had its own unique skill tree, and if that wasn't enough, I could join a guild or contract vampirism to unlock even more skill lines. Spending your skill points does not mean tying yourself down, and finally we have an MMO that truly embraces my need to experiment. All future MMOs would be wise to follow suit. The combat in ESO is a huge improvement over most MMOs in today's market. It's dynamic and keeps you paying attention. As a longtime MMO player, I found myself being punished for trying to spam abilities too often, and more often than not, I was killed because I was rapidly firing spells rather than trying to read my opponent and what he was going to do next. I came to realize that ESO is a game that rewards attentiveness rather than button mashing, a reality that I gladly accepted. A timely block or a quick interrupt is more valuable than simply increasing one's damage output. This provided an attention-grabbing combat system that I was more than happy to be a part of. What made the Elder Scrolls franchise the juggernaut that it is today? It certainly wasn't the combat or the polish. It was the world. The majority of Elder Scrolls lovers will tell you that it is Bethesda's ability to create believable worlds that drew them headfirst into these incredible games. With an overabundance of quests, dungeons, books, and nooks, a player could explore a test title for hundreds of hours and still not see it all. Simply existing within Tamriel's universe has been its own reward. until you've played The Elder Scrolls Online. Raw exploration is just not fun in ESO, and a huge letdown. If there was anything ZeniMax had to get right to win over the traditional TES fan, it was this, and they just fell short. After leaving the Cold Harbor tutorial, you'll be thrown into Tamriel proper. One of the first things you'll notice after leaving the cold dark realm of Oblivion is just how beautiful this game is for an MMO. No, you're not going to get the big beautiful vista moments like you did in Skyrim. And yes, when you look too closely at textures in first person, things can start looking Minecraft. But for an MMO, this game renders some beautiful environments. With such an eye-catching landscape, you might experience a moment like I did of sheer excitement as you dream about all the boundless adventures to be had in this new Elder Scrolls game. As is the hallmark of the franchise, you might look at your compass, choose a direction, and start running, only this time you'll be met with this. They might as well be the big yellow question marks you've seen in games like World of Warcraft. These markers tell you where you can pick up all your quests, and they effectively kill any hopes of spontaneous adventure. You might try and ignore these hand-holding quest markers and forge your own path through Tamriel, but I'd advise against it. Without quests to guide your way, ESO quickly turns into a game of locked doors and empty spaces. The first dungeons you'll stumble across will either be glued shut or packed with players steamrolling mobs, turning the once intimate act of dungeon diving into a party you never wanted to show up to. Within the first hour of this game, it will become painfully obvious that ZeniMax Online Studios does not want to entrust you with your freedom. Instead of giving you the power of limitless exploration, ESO will reward you for staying on a linear path. Follow one quest giver to the next quest giver to the next, stray from the course, and you'll be artificially walled off or even killed by higher level mobs. The leveling experience in this game doesn't feel like a fantasy epic. It's an Elder Scrolls game with training wheels at the best of times. It feels like a grind. And while many long-standing MMO gamers will be used to that sort of thing, fans of the TES franchise are likely to get bored fast. Now I know what you might be thinking, especially you MMO veterans out there. But Josh, this is pretty standard gameplay for an MMO, and you'd be right, it is standard. However, as an Elder Scrolls title, ESO needed to create new standards in order to stand out, especially when it comes to exploration. This is the aspect of gameplay where ZeniMax needed to innovate. They couldn't afford to simply close their eyes and hope for the best, but they did. ZeniMax took a gamble and innovated the MMO class system by applying Skyrim's open-ended progression. I only wish they had done the same with exploration. In this aspect, ZeniMax played it safe and took no chances. And as we've seen time and time again in the games industry, when you play it safe, you breed mediocrity. And as a subscription-based MMO in today's market, you can't afford to be mediocre. But that is what ESO is when it comes to the leveling experience. Simply average. The quest will have you doing the same mindless chores, like collecting 5 of these or destroying 7 of those. For long-standing TES fans, it's likely to get boring fast, and for MMO veterans it's even worse, because there are many free-to-play MMOs that have a much better leveling experience than ESO. Aside from the main quest line, which actually has some memorable moments, the missions you'll be charged with will feel very small and underwhelming. PvE siege battles during quest lines, which are supposed to be these epic events, will be undercut by stupid NPC AI. A quote-unquote epic siege battle, for example, in a city, will feature friendly NPCs and enemy NPCs who will take turns endlessly hitting each other until you step in and intervene. It doesn't have to be like this. Why not enable the player to rally the troops and lead an army against his enemies in these instant scenarios? This is a game that boasts hundreds of characters on screen at once. I mean, the technology is there, but we never see it outside of PvP. It's a lost opportunity, and that's what this game feels like a lot of the time. A lot of lost opportunities. The quest stories themselves are extremely linear and will give the illusion of player choice. On the rare occasions I was presented with branching dialogue, it was highlighted with big red letters, like the game was screaming out, "Look, choice!" You like that sort of thing, but these choices had little impact on the story. Most of the time, these dialogue branches would come at the end of quest lines, meaning you rarely ever got to see the consequences your choices had. Rather than a hero shaping his own destiny, I felt like an errand boy at the mercy of my quest givers, a puppet unable to tell anyone what I really thought of them and their ridiculous quests. Luckily, I was rewarded every now and then for being a good lapdog. As someone who listens to everything an NPC has to say, you'll likely find that some of these quests actually reward your attentiveness. During dialogue, NPCs would drop an occasional hint every now and then, and that could help me during my quest line. This sort of system that rewards the folks who actually listen to dialogue was much appreciated. Granted too, this game is fully voice acted, which definitely helps. As a person who loves to exhaust dialogue, I happily chatted up any NPC willing to stop and talk. Unlike most MMOs where I walk through a town virtually unnoticed, ZeniMax Online has gone out of their way to make you feel like an actual denizen of Tamriel. After arriving in the city of Daggerfall, I was told by passing guards to stay out of trouble, a familiar sentiment for fans of the past Elder Scrolls games. And then later, when I earned the guards' respect by saving their king, they showered me in praise and cheered me as I passed by. This, coupled with the fact that I could rummage through homes in search of books and other valuables, had me feeling like I was actually a part of this world. It was during these smaller moments that I felt like I was in an Elder Scrolls game. Interacting with the world and its characters on my own gave me the brief moments of discovery that kept me going. The writing in ESO is a bit of a mixed bag. Some characters were quirky and interesting, while others were dull and generic. This provided a narrative that could be engaging one moment, then just plain silly the next. Let me give you an example. Without spoiling anything, it's common knowledge that you'll be talking to more than a few Daedric princes that you'll recognize from the past test games if you've played those. Sheogorath is one of the series' most beloved characters. His madness and love for cheese never fails to entertain, and you'll be happy to know you interact with him more than once in ESO. He's not the prince you remember, though. When my character entered the realm of madness for the first time, I was treated to one of the dullest quests in my life. Instead of being treated to adventures of mania and madness, I was told I needed to kill wave after wave of scamps for no particular reason. So there I was, sitting in front of a portal for a minute or more, just killing scamps. It didn't feel like a Sheogorath questline at all, it just felt like busy work. After that, I traveled through Sheogorath's pocket of oblivion called Cheesemonger's Hollow, which sounds pretty interesting. I mean, I was thinking maybe the walls there were made of cheese with cheese monsters to battle, something kooky, something Sheogorath, but it wasn't interesting at all. It was just a place that looked like every other Oblivion area in the game. The level design leaves much to be desired, and Sheogorath did eventually show up after I killed this generic mini-boss, but while he was silly, he was voiced by someone completely different from Oblivion and Skyrim. This isn't bad within itself, but after a bit of outside research on my behalf, I discovered that Wes Johnson, the voice actor that voiced every Elder Scrolls game since Morrowind, including the role of Sheogorath, he wasn't even invited to do the voice of Sheogorath for the Elder Scrolls Online. Not even invited. At this point, I had to wonder, is ZeniMax even trying to capture the magic of the test games that came before, or are they just a young studio way in over their heads? If you're looking to play the Elder Scrolls Online to enjoy the story, you're going to be disappointed. Now I know what you might be thinking. Josh, you moron, this is an MMO, it isn't meant to be played alone for the sake of story. And you'd be right. You'd be rude, but you'd be right. The greatest asset an MMO does have at its disposal is not its NPCs, but its players. When you can group with your friends and have a good time adventuring and interacting, you have a good MMO. Only by that definition, ESO isn't a good MMO. Like many players interested in this game, I was following ESO's development because it was promising to be an Elder Scrolls game that I could play with my friends. Only the game we have here totally fails to do that. Whether I was questing with a group of other players or just one friend, we were constantly being split up by the server's phasing mechanic. The result was seeing my friends vanish into thin air. Naturally, I'd pull up my friends list and travel to their phase, but the server wouldn't let me. It was beyond frustrating. And it limited co-op play to the instance dungeons and Dark Anchor events. Dark Anchor events that were fun at first, but quickly become stale due to repetitiveness. On top of all this, the friend I was playing ESO with had a bugged account and could no longer log into the game, despite having an active subscription plan and everything. After weeks of trying to contact customer support, he's since unsubscribed, which is funny considering when ZeniMax announced their $15 a month subscription model, they promised premium customer support. Now ZeniMax has since addressed this phasing debacle on their website, saying that it is going to be fixed in a future patch, but the fact that this was able to release in the game at launch, a problem this blatantly counterintuitive to the MMO experience, it's just embarrassing. Now let's move on to talk about PvP, because this game isn't all bad. There's some great stuff here. If there's anything I can say I thoroughly enjoyed in ESO, it has to be its player versus player content. Fantasy siege battles never felt so good. If you've ever dreamed about fighting in Helm's Deep skill battles where siege engines and burning oil are your tools of the trade, you needn't look no further. As the spiritual successor to Dark Age of Camelot, the Elder Scrolls Online will have you sieging enemy keeps or cutting off enemy supply lines in the strategic province of Cyrodiil. In this MMO, strategy matters. Remember the Chalamo, in Cyrodiil numbers don't win wars, but strategy does. A small group of well-organized players can stand up to the mindless Zergs and come out on top. It's a very hard thing to pull off for any MMO developer, but the fact that ESO's World PvP works like it should is a testament to the hard work and thought ZeniMax put into balancing its player versus player experience. PvP was so much fun, and I wish that I could have leveled solely in Cyrodiil, but sadly, you're not rewarded enough with experience to make that very viable, which is a damn shame. The only negative you might encounter in Cyrodiil is the travel times, due to its tremendous size and limited fast travel points. You could buy a horse to help you along, but that's going to set you back 17,200 gold, or a staggering 42,700 for a fast one. Raising enough money to afford a mount on your own could be harder than you think, considering mobs do not part with gold easily. Alternatively, if you want to sell items to other players and make your wealth that way, I'd think twice. Instead of adapting the popular global auction house system used in games like Guild Wars 2, ZeniMax opt in for an auction house system that is limited to guild trading. It's a system that has its pros and cons, but mostly cons. Not having a centralized auction house slows the economy down to a crawl. I've seen the majority of players taking their wares to the streets and spamming zone chat. It seems the guild stores were a good idea on paper, but honestly the global auction house system simply works, and the quicker something like that can be implemented the better. It's worked for a very long time in MMOs, and it's things like this that make me feel like ZeniMax is trying to innovate their game in all the wrong places. So if you don't want to deal with a limited guild store system, and you don't feel like endlessly grinding mobs to afford your horse, you can visit the game's cash shop and flat out buy a mount for $15. It kinda makes you wonder if horses in ESO are as expensive as they are, because ZeniMax wants to drive you to their store to squeeze that extra 15 out of you, as if 15 a month isn't already enough. Again, these are the kind of moves you'd expect from a free-to-play title. Now, I want to make it clear it isn't right or wrong that ZeniMax would want more of your money. They are a company after all. However, there is such a thing as consumer goodwill, and ZeniMax doesn't seem to give a shit about that. When ZeniMax does things like lock out a race at character creation or charge money for horses, it puts many gamers on edge. You might even start asking yourself, was ZeniMax Online looking to make a complete Elder Scrolls experience? Or were they just looking to cash in on their incredibly powerful IP? If building things with your own two virtual hands through blacksmithing, enchanting, and woodworking sounds appealing, ZeniMax has been looking out for you. The crafting system in ESO is extensive to say the least. With the leveling system, it's rather easy to max out several professions at once. Crafted gear almost always has slightly better stats than their boss-dropped counterparts, and even if you find a piece of loot with a unique enchantment that cannot be crafted, a crafter can still improve on it by adding enchantments or increasing its rarity. On the note of loot, it's important we touch up on dungeons, and more specifically instance dungeons. The Elder Scrolls Online launched with a looking for group system, and although it has its issues, it seems to work fairly well. The flexible skill system allows for on-the-fly exchange of roles within your group. This can be crucial should a healer or tank go down, and provides a cool dynamic. The bosses overall are a little too easy, which is a common fault for new developers. Hopefully with upcoming content we will see a much harder experience, because as it sits now, it's a step above a face roll for the veteran MMO player. If this is your first MMO, however, the group dungeons in ESO should provide for a good challenge, as you duck, dodge, and roll your way to victory. The Elder Scrolls Online won't be breaking the traditional MMO mold anytime soon, despite a few genuinely good innovations. The simple fact of the matter is this: if you can show me something that you enjoy about ESO, chances are I can show you one or two free-to-play MMOs that simply do that thing better. As someone who's been playing MMOs for the majority of his life, The Elder Scrolls Online is simply a decent MMO with some good emphasis on its RPG elements. Now, it can't be argued, The Elder Scrolls Online is a game of great ambition. During its near 7-year development cycle, it tried to take on the world of Tamriel, which is an incredible task. Where past test titles only featured a province at a time, this title features much more than that. Only, I think ZOS's reach far exceeded their grasp. The result is a game that is about quantity over quality. Instead of a world with wall-to-wall exploration, you are left with something that feels watered down. An Elder Scrolls game that is missing the magic. An MMO that I shockingly cannot play with my friends. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into my review of The Elder Scrolls Online. I've spent a year following this game, and finding the words to write this review has been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. My life's not that hard, I guess. I've been Josh. Thanks for watching.